The voice memo started playing while Mason was fixing the kitchen sink. Claire's laughter echoed from the tablet she'd left on the counter, followed by Brady's voice. Your husband actually thinks giving permission makes him powerful. Poor fool has no idea you've been planning this for months. Mason's wrench froze mid-turn. Water dripped steadily from the pipe joint, each drop hitting the bucket with a metallic ping that seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat. He's so pathetic, Claire's voice continued. Sitting there at dinner, trying to be the understanding husband. I just needed him to say yes so I wouldn't be the bad guy when I leave him for you. The tablet screen showed a recording from 3 hours ago. Mason recognized the bedroom, their bedroom. The same room where he'd held Claire through her nightmares after her mother died. The same bed where they'd conceived their daughter. What about the kid? Brady asked. Haley's 17. She already thinks her dad's a loser. She'll choose me when the time comes. Mason set down his wrench and walked to the tablet. His reflection stared back from the black screen after the recording ended. 42 years old, graying temples, calloused hands from 20 years of fixing other people's problems. He looked tired, defeated, but something else flickered in his eyes as he replayed the conversation in his mind. Something cold and calculating that hadn't been there an hour ago. Okay, he whispered to his reflection. You want war. The proposal came over takeout Chinese on a Tuesday night. Claire had been unusually quiet during dinner, picking at her lo mein while Haley scrolled through her phone, ignoring both parents. I've been thinking about us, Claire said suddenly, setting down her chopsticks. About our marriage. Mason looked up from his sweet and sour pork. What about it? We're stuck, Mason. We've been together since college, and I feel like I'm suffocating. Like I never got to explore who I am outside of being a wife and mother. Haley finally looked up from her phone. Mom's right, Dad. You guys got married way too young. Most people date around before settling down. We're not most people, Mason said quietly. We're a family. Claire leaned forward, her voice taking on that therapeutic tone she'd picked up from her yoga instructor training. I'm not saying we should get divorced. I'm saying we should open our marriage, give each other space to grow. The fork felt heavy in Mason's hand. You want to sleep with other people? I want us both to have the freedom to explore connections with other people. It doesn't mean we love each other less. It means we're secure enough in our relationship to trust each other. Haley nodded enthusiastically. That's actually really mature, Mom. Dad, you're being kind of possessive. Mason looked at his daughter, his little girl who used to fall asleep on his chest during movie nights, who still called him when she needed help with her car. Now she was looking at him like he was some primitive caveman who couldn't understand modern relationships. I need to think about it, he said. Of course, Claire smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Take all the time you need. I just want us to be happy. That night, Mason lay awake staring at the ceiling while Claire slept peacefully beside him. He'd been thinking about their conversation for weeks, actually. Not about opening their marriage, but about the distance that had grown between them over the past year. The way she'd started working late at the yoga studio. The way she'd bought new clothes and started caring about her appearance in ways she hadn't since college. The way she'd begun talking about finding herself and personal growth. He'd assumed it was a midlife crisis. Something they'd worked through together, like they'd worked through everything else over the past 20 years. Now he realized she'd already made her choice. She was just asking for permission to make it official. Brady showed up on a Saturday morning while Mason was replacing the deck railing. 6'2", lean muscle, perfect teeth, and the kind of cocky grin that made Mason's jaw clench. You must be Mason, Brady said, extending a hand. I'm Brady Collins. Claire's been telling me about the renovation work you're doing. Mind if I take a look? Mason wiped his hands on his jeans before shaking. Brady's grip was firm but not aggressive, practiced, like everything else about him. Claire mentioned you, Mason said carefully. Yeah, she's been great, really supportive of my fitness business. I was thinking I could help out with some of the heavier lifting around here. I used to do construction before I got into personal training. Claire appeared in the doorway wearing yoga pants and a tank top that showed off the muscle definition she'd been working on. Brady, I didn't know you were stopping by. I was in the neighborhood, Brady said, flashing that perfect smile. Thought I'd see if you needed any help with the deck. That's so sweet of you, Claire beamed. Mason, Brady's really handy. He renovated his entire condo last year. Mason watched the interaction with growing unease. The way Claire's voice went up an octave. The way Brady's eyes lingered on her body. The way they both seemed to forget he was standing there. "I've got it handled," Mason said. "But thanks for the offer." "Of course," Brady nodded. "I respect that this is your house, your project. Claire just mentioned you've been working long hours at the shop, and I have some free time this weekend." "That's really thoughtful," Claire said, touching Brady's arm. "Mason, maybe Brady could help with the bathroom tiles. You've been putting that off for months." "I said I've got it handled." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Claire's smile faltered, and Brady's expression shifted from friendly to calculating. "No worries, man," Brady said. "I'm just trying to help out a friend. Claire's been great to me, and I believe in returning favors." After Brady left, Claire cornered Mason in the garage. "That was embarrassing," she said. "Brady was just trying to be nice." Brady was marking his territory. "God, Mason, listen to yourself. You sound paranoid. He's a friend, someone I work with. You work at a yoga studio. He's a personal trainer at a gym. We share clients. It's called networking. Maybe if you tried to expand your social circle instead of just hanging out with the same 3 guys from high school, you'd understand." Mason turned back to his workbench, organizing tools he'd already organized twice. "I understand plenty." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're threatened by any man who shows me attention. That's not healthy, Mason. That's controlling." "I'm not controlling. I'm protective." "There's a difference." "There really isn't," Claire said quietly. "And that's exactly why we need to work on our communication. Maybe some couples therapy would help." Mason looked at his wife of 20 years. Really looked at her. The woman who'd held his hand through his father's funeral, who'd supported him when he'd started his business, who'd been his partner in everything. Now she was looking at him like he was the problem. "Fine," he said. "Let's try therapy." The tablet had been a Christmas gift from Haley, something to help her technologically challenged parents stay connected. Claire used it for yoga videos and recipe apps. Mason barely touched it. But when the kitchen sink started leaking and Claire left for her evening class, Mason grabbed the tablet to look up repair videos. That's when he noticed the voice memo app was still running. He almost deleted it without listening. Almost. The recording was 3 hours and 17 minutes long. Most of it was background noise. Claire getting ready for her yoga class, puttering around the bedroom. But the last 20 minutes were Brady's voice, clear and unmistakable. Mason played it through twice, then a third time. Each replay felt like a punch to the gut, but he forced himself to listen, to memorize every word, every inflection. By the time Claire came home, Mason had transcribed the entire conversation. He'd also made 3 copies of the audio file and uploaded them to a cloud storage account Claire didn't know about. "How was class?" he asked when she walked in, still wearing her instructor outfit. "Good. Challenging." "I'm exhausted." She kissed his cheek, the same perfunctory gesture she'd been giving him for months. "How's the sink?" "Fixed. No more leaks." "You're so handy," she said, already heading upstairs. "I'm going to take a shower." Mason waited until he heard the water running, then pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Trevor's number. His old army buddy ran a private security firm now, specializing in corporate investigations and background checks. "Mason, Jesus, it's been months. How are you, brother?" "I need help, Trev." "The kind of help that requires discretion." Silence on the other end, then. "What kind of help?" "Surveillance equipment, a good divorce lawyer, and I need you to keep this between us." "Crap, Claire?" "Yeah. I'm sorry, man. I really am. But I'm also glad you called me instead of doing something stupid." "I'm not going to do anything stupid," Mason said, watching water drip from the fixed pipe joint. "I'm going to do something smart." Trevor's office was in a converted warehouse downtown, tucked between a print shop and a Vietnamese restaurant. Mason had been there once before for a barbecue Trevor had thrown for his army buddies. Now he was sitting across from his friend's desk, looking at a price list for surveillance equipment. "Hidden cameras, audio recording devices, GPS trackers," Trevor explained. "All legal as long as you're using them in your own home and vehicles. The phone monitoring software is a gray area, but if you're on the family plan and paying the bills, most courts consider it acceptable." What about admissibility? Depends on what you find and how you present it. That's why you need a good lawyer, someone who understands the nuances of family law. Trevor slid a business card across the desk. Douglas Langford. He's old school, expensive, and ruthless. Represents a lot of high net worth divorces. If you're serious about this, he's your guy. Mason pocketed the card. How long for the equipment? I can have basic surveillance set up in your house this weekend. Cameras in common areas, audio in the bedroom and living room. The car tracking is easy. Just stick it under the chassis. Phone monitoring takes longer, but I can walk you through it. What's this going to cost me? For you, cost of equipment plus installation, call it $3,000. Mason had $3,000. Barely. It would clean out his personal savings account, but Claire didn't know about that account. He'd been squirreling away cash for years, originally planning to surprise her with a vacation to Hawaii for their 20th anniversary. Now he was spending it on proof of her betrayal. Do it, he said. The first week of surveillance yielded nothing useful. Claire taught her classes, came home, made dinner, watched TV. If she was having an affair, she was being careful about it. The second week, Brady started showing up more frequently, always with plausible excuses, dropping off yoga mats, discussing a potential business partnership, offering to help with household repairs. Mason watched the recordings each night after Claire went to bed, taking notes on dates, times, and interactions. The audio was harder to parse, lots of background noise, muffled conversations, but gradually patterns emerged. Brady was there every Tuesday and Thursday when Mason worked late at the shop. He stayed for exactly 2 hours, always leaving 15 minutes before Claire had to pick up Haley from school. They were careful, but not careful enough. The breakthrough came on a Thursday in March. Mason was reviewing the bedroom audio when he heard Claire's voice, clearer than usual. We need to be more careful. Mason's been acting suspicious lately. Maybe he knows, Brady replied. Maybe it's time to tell him. Not yet. I want to make sure Haley's on my side first. If this goes to court, I need her to choose me. What if he fights for custody? He won't. Mason's not a fighter. He's a fixer. He thinks if he works hard enough, he can repair anything, even our marriage. Poor fool, Brady laughed. Must be nice to be that naive. It is, Claire agreed. It makes everything so much easier. Mason saved the recording and added it to his growing collection of evidence. Phone records showing hundreds of texts between Claire and Brady. GPS data tracking Claire's car to Brady's apartment complex. Credit card statements showing purchases at restaurants and hotels Mason had never been to. But the real gold mine came when he started monitoring Brady's social media. The guy couldn't help himself, posting gym selfies, bragging about his conquest of married women, sharing screenshots of conversations with friends about his sugar mama who was financing his lifestyle. Mason screenshotted everything. Every post, every comment, every piece of evidence that showed Brady's character and motivations. By April, he had enough evidence to bury them both, but he wasn't ready to move yet. He wanted to understand the full scope of the betrayal, to map every lie, every manipulation, every moment of deception. He wanted to build a case that would be impossible to refute. The first direct confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday in late April. Mason had left work early, claiming he had a dentist appointment. Instead, he'd parked across the street from Brady's gym, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Brady worked with clients. He waited until Brady was alone, then walked inside. Mason, Brady looked surprised, but not panicked. What brings you here? I wanted to see where you work. Claire talks about you all the time. She's great. Really supportive of local businesses. Mason looked around the gym. Expensive equipment, pristine mirrors, the kind of place that catered to people with money and time to burn. Must be nice having supportive friends. Yeah, it is. Claire's been really helpful with my business plan. She has a good head for numbers. She does, always has. When we first got married, she managed all our finances. Kept us afloat when I was starting the business. Brady nodded, but his eyes had gone wary. That's great, man. Sounds like you guys have a solid partnership. We do, built on trust and honesty. Two people who've been through everything together. Of course! Mason stepped closer, lowering his voice. So I'm sure you can understand why I'd be concerned about someone trying to undermine that trust. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you know exactly what I mean. They stared at each other for a long moment. Brady was bigger, younger, probably stronger, But Mason had been in fights before, real fights, where losing meant dying. He'd learned to read people, to spot weakness beneath the surface. Brady blinked first. Look, Mason, I think there might be some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I know what you are, I know what you're doing, and I know it's going to stop. Or what? Mason smiled, the same cold smile he'd perfected during his army days. Or you'll find out what happens when someone threatens my family. He turned and walked out, leaving Brady standing alone in the middle of his perfect gym. The next morning, Claire was waiting for him in the kitchen, arms crossed, face flushed with anger. Brady called me last night, she said without preamble. He said you threatened him. I had a conversation with him. Man to man. You can't do that, Mason. You can't intimidate my friends. Your friends? Is that what we're calling them now? What's that supposed to mean? Mason poured himself coffee, taking his time. It means I'm tired of pretending I don't know what's going on. Nothing's going on. Brady's a friend and a business associate. That's it. Bees? Claire's face went white. In 20 years of marriage, Mason had never used that tone with her. Never looked at her with such open contempt. Excuse me? You heard me. This whole thing, the open marriage, the friendship with Brady, the lectures about personal growth, it's all BS. You've been planning this for months. Planning what? To leave me, to take Haley and whatever else you can get your hands on. Brady's just your exit strategy. That's paranoid conspiracy theory nonsense, and you know it. Is it? Because I've been doing some research, Claire, about Brady's background, his history with married women, his financial situation. Very interesting stuff. Claire's composure cracked slightly. What kind of research? The kind that reveals who people really are. The kind that shows what they're really after. I don't know what you think you found, but I found enough. The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Haley getting ready for school upstairs. What do you want? Claire asked finally. I want the truth, all of it, starting with how long this has been going on. Mason, the truth, Claire. You owe me that much. She stared at him for a long moment, then seemed to deflate slightly. 6 months. It started 6 months ago. Before you asked for the open marriage? Yes. And Haley, does she know? No, of course not. But you've been turning her against me. Making her think I'm the problem. I've been helping her see that there are different ways to approach relationships. That possessiveness isn't love, and that her father is a controlling a-hole who doesn't deserve respect. I never said that. You didn't have to. She got the message. Haley appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder, car keys in hand. Got what message? Mason and Claire both turned to look at their daughter. 17 years old, beautiful, smart, and completely oblivious to the war being fought over her future. Nothing, honey, Claire said quickly. Just a disagreement about household chores. Haley rolled her eyes. You guys are so weird. I'm going to school. After she left, Claire turned back to Mason. What happens now? Now you have a choice. You can end this thing with Brady, commit to working on our marriage, and we can try to rebuild what we had. Or you can keep lying to me and find out what divorce looks like when the other party has documentation of infidelity. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you options. Choose wisely. Claire chose to escalate. That afternoon, Mason received a call from Haley's school. She'd been in a car accident, nothing serious, but the car was totaled and she was shaken up. I'm on my way, Mason said, already grabbing his keys. Actually, someone's already here to pick her up, the school secretary said. Brady Collins? He's listed as an emergency contact. Mason's blood went cold. Since when? I'm not sure. The paperwork was filed last week. Mason drove to the school at 20 miles over the speed limit, his mind racing. When he arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty. Haley's car was in the tow truck, front end crumpled but not badly. A fender bender, not a serious accident, but Haley was gone, and so was Brady. Mason called Claire. No answer. He called Haley's phone. Voicemail. Finally, he called Brady directly. Mason, what's up, man? Where's my daughter? She's fine. Just had a little accident at school. I'm taking her to get checked out at urgent care. You're not her father. You have no right to make medical decisions for her. Relax, dude. Claire asked me to pick her up. She's stuck at work. Bring her home. Now. We'll be there in a couple hours, after the doctor sees her. The line went dead. Mason sat in his truck outside the school, hands shaking with rage. This was a power play, a message. Brady was demonstrating that he had access to Mason's daughter, that he could make decisions about her welfare, and Claire had given him that power. Douglas Langford's office was everything Trevor had promised: expensive, intimidating, and designed to make clients feel like they were hiring a weapon rather than a lawyer. Langford himself was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of sharp-eyed intensity that came from decades of high-stakes litigation. "Mr. Hayes," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his massive desk. "Trevor tells me you need representation in a custody matter." "Divorce and custody," Mason corrected. "My wife is having an affair. I want to end the marriage and retain custody of my daughter." "Tell me about the affair." Mason spent the next hour laying out his evidence: the voice recordings, the financial records, the social media posts. Langford listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is substantial," Langford said finally. "But custody cases are complex. Courts generally favor joint custody unless there's evidence of misuse or neglect." "There is." Mason pulled out his phone and played the recording from the previous day, Brady's voice clear and unmistakable. "Your daughter's pretty mature for 17. Real mature. Where did you get this?" "Audio surveillance in my own home. Perfectly legal." Langford's expression darkened. What exactly was the context of this conversation? Brady was telling Claire about a conversation he'd had with Haley. Apparently, he's been giving her advice about boys, relationships, life choices, getting close to her. And your wife's response? She laughed. Said Haley needed a male role model who wasn't stuck in the past. Langford set down his pen. "Mr. Hayes, I need to be clear about something. If you're suggesting that this man has acted inappropriately with your daughter, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that a 30-year-old man is inserting himself into my teenage daughter's life, with my wife's encouragement, and I want it stopped. Do you have any evidence of actual inappropriate behavior?" "Not yet, but I'm not waiting for it to happen." Langford leaned back in his chair. "What's your timeline?" "I want to file as soon as possible, before they have a chance to prepare a defense." "That's not how this works. We need to build a comprehensive case. Document everything. Establish a pattern of behavior that demonstrates why sole custody is in your daughter's best interest." "How long?" 3 months, maybe 4. Mason stood up. "Too long. They're already moving against me. Today, Brady picked up my daughter from school without my permission. Tomorrow, who knows what they'll do. Mr. Hayes, find a way to expedite this, please. My daughter is in danger, and every day we wait makes it worse." Langford studied him for a long moment. "I'll see what I can do, but I need you to be careful. Don't give them ammunition to use against you. No confrontations, no threats, no actions that could be construed as maltreatment or intimidation. What if they escalate? Document everything. Record every interaction. Let them hang themselves with their own rope." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Mason was working late at the shop reviewing quarterly reports when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife is at the Marriott downtown, room 412. Thought you should know." "A friend?" Mason stared at the message. It could be a trap, a setup designed to make him look like a jealous husband. Or it could be genuine, someone who knew about the affair and thought he deserved to know the truth. He grabbed his keys and drove to the hotel. The Marriott was upscale, the kind of place Claire would never be able to afford on her yoga instructor salary. But Brady's personal training business was apparently doing well enough to finance romantic getaways. Mason parked across the street and called Trevor. "I need you to meet me at the Marriott downtown. Bring a camera." "Mason, what are you doing?" "Gathering evidence." "This is a bad idea, brother. Let me handle it." "No. I need to see this for myself." Trevor arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a professional camera with a telephoto lens. "This is against my better judgment," he said. "Noted. Can you get a clear shot of the 4th floor?" "Probably. What am I looking for?" "Room 412. I want photos of whoever comes and goes." They waited for 2 hours. At 9:30, Claire appeared in the 4th floor window, wearing a hotel bathrobe. At 9:45, Brady joined her, also in a robe. Trevor's camera clicked steadily. Got them, he said. Clear shots of both faces. Good. Now we wait for them to leave. Mason, I know what you're going to say. This is stalking. This is maltreatment. This is going to backfire in court. Actually, I was going to say this is evidence of infidelity, which is still grounds for divorce in this state. But yeah, all that other stuff too. They waited another hour. At 11:15, Claire and Brady emerged from the hotel together, laughing about something. Brady had his arm around Claire's waist, and she was looking up at him with the kind of adoration she used to reserve for Mason. That's enough, Trevor said. We've got what we need. But Mason was already getting out of the truck. Wait here. Mason, don't. But Mason was already crossing the street, walking directly toward the couple. He'd made it halfway across the parking lot when Claire spotted him. Her face went white. Brady's hand dropped from her waist. Mason, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? I think the question is, what are you doing here? I can explain. No need. The pictures explain everything. Claire looked around frantically, as if she might find an escape route. Pictures? Mason gestured toward Trevor's truck. Professional quality. Admissible in court? Brady stepped forward, his earlier cockiness replaced by visible anxiety. Look, man, this isn't what it looks like. It looks like my wife is having an affair with a guy young enough to be her son. It looks like you're both liars. It looks like I've been played for a fool. Mason, please, Claire said, tears starting to flow. Let's go home and talk about this. Home? You mean the home you've been betraying for the past 6 months? The home you've been using as a staging ground for your affair? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. And now I have proof. Brady's face had gone from anxious to angry. You know what, Mason? Maybe if you'd been paying attention to your wife instead of burying yourself in work, she wouldn't have needed to find companionship elsewhere. Companionship? Is that what you call it? I call it being there for someone who deserves better than a workaholic husband who treats her like a piece of furniture. Mason smiled, the same cold smile he'd used at the gym. You know what I call it? I call it alienation of affection. It's a legal term. Look it up. What does that mean? Claire asked. It means Brady here is about to get sued for destroying our marriage. And it means you're about to find out what happens when someone with documentation goes up against someone with denials. Mason turned and walked back to Trevor's truck, leaving them standing in the parking lot. How'd it go? Trevor asked. Better than expected. They're rattled. Good, because now they're going to lawyer up and fight back. Let them. I'm ready. Claire's lawyer was everything Mason had expected, young, aggressive, and convinced that the best defense was a good offense. The court papers arrived on a Friday morning. Claire was seeking sole custody of Haley, claiming that Mason had become increasingly unstable and controlling, and that his surveillance and stalking behavior made him unfit to parent. The petition included a restraining order request seeking to prevent Mason from coming within 500 feet of Claire or Brady. This is BS, Mason told Langford over the phone. I'm not the one who's been lying and cheating. It's strategy, Langford replied calmly. They're trying to paint you as the aggressor, make you look like the unstable one. Can they do that? They can try. But we have evidence of the affair, and we have documentation of their attempts to alienate your daughter's affections. The restraining order won't stick, but the custody battle is going to be ugly. How ugly? They're going to claim you're an unfit parent, that your work schedule makes you unavailable, that your recent behavior shows you're mentally unstable. And our defense? The truth, that you're a loving father who's been systematically betrayed by his wife and her boyfriend. That they've been manipulating your daughter and attempting to destroy your relationship with her. What about the audio recordings? They're our ace in the hole, but we need to be careful about how we use them. Too aggressive, and the judge might see you as vindictive. What about Brady's social media posts? Goldmine. His bragging about married women, his comments about your daughter, his obvious financial motivations, all of it paints him as a hunter. When do we strike back? Next week. I'm filing a counterpetition for divorce on grounds of infidelity, seeking sole custody and spousal support. Spousal support? Claire hasn't worked full-time in 15 years. She's been living off your income while pursuing her yoga instructor hobby. The court will consider that when dividing assets. Good. What else? I'm also recommending that we sue Brady for alienation of affection. It's a civil matter, separate from the divorce, but it sends a message. What kind of message? That actions have consequences, that you can't destroy someone's family without paying a price. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late May. Mason arrived at the courthouse wearing his best suit, flanked by Langford and Trevor. Claire was already there with her lawyer and Brady, who'd apparently decided to show up for moral support. They sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, looking like they were attending a funeral. Judge Patricia Morris was in her 50s, with silver hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. "This is a custody hearing in the matter of Hayes versus Hayes," she began. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings, and I have to say this is one of the more contentious cases I've seen in recent months." Claire's lawyer, a young woman named Sarah Kim, stood up first. "Your Honor, my client is seeking sole custody of the couple's minor daughter, Haley Hayes, age 17. We believe that Mr. Hayes has exhibited increasingly erratic and controlling behavior that makes him unfit to parent." "Can you be more specific, Miss Kim?" "Mr. Hayes has been stalking my client and her friend, Mr. Collins. He's installed surveillance equipment in the family home without my client's knowledge. He's made threats against Mr. Collins and has demonstrated a pattern of intimidation and maltreatment." Judge Morris looked at Mason. "Mr. Hayes, how do you respond to these allegations?" Langford stood up. "Your Honor, my client has been documenting his wife's infidelity in preparation for divorce proceedings. The surveillance equipment was installed in his own home, which is perfectly legal. As for threats, we have no evidence of any threatening behavior." "What about the incident at Mr. Collins's gym? A conversation between two adults. No threats were made." "Mr. Collins," Judge Morris said, "I'd like to hear from you directly. What exactly did Mr. Hayes say to you?" Brady stood up, clearly nervous. "He said I was trying to undermine his marriage and that I needed to stop, or I'd find out what happens when someone threatens his family." "Did you interpret that as a threat?" "Yes, Your Honor. I felt threatened." "And what was your relationship with Mrs. Hayes at the time of this conversation?" Brady glanced at Claire's lawyer, who nodded. "We were friends, close friends." "How close?" "We were, romantically involved." "While Mrs. Hayes was still married?" "Yes." Judge Morris made a note. "Mr. Hayes, did you know about this romantic relationship when you spoke to Mr. Collins?" Mason stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. I had evidence of the affair." "What kind of evidence?" Langford stepped forward. "Your Honor, we have audio recordings, photographic evidence, and documentation of the affair spanning several months." "I'd like to hear one of these recordings." Mason felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. Langford played the hotel room recording, Claire and Brady's voices, clear and unmistakable, discussing their relationship and their plans for the future. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of the recording. Claire's face had gone pale, and Brady was staring at his hands. "Mrs. Hayes," Judge Morris said, "is that your voice on the recording?" "Yes, Your Honor. And you were discussing your affair with Mr. Collins?" "Yes." "While still married to your husband?" "Yes." "And you were discussing plans to leave your husband and take your daughter with you?" Claire's voice was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Morris leaned back in her chair. "Miss Kim, given this evidence, how do you justify your client's request for sole custody?" "Your Honor, while my client made poor choices in her marriage, that doesn't automatically make her an unfit mother. Mr. Hayes' response to discovering the affair has been extreme and concerning." "Extreme how?" "The surveillance, the stalking, the confrontational behavior. These actions show someone who lacks emotional control and good judgment." Langford stood up again. "Your Honor, if I may, we have additional evidence regarding Mr. Collins's relationship with the minor child." "Proceed." Langford played another recording, Brady's voice talking to Claire about Haley. "Your daughter's pretty mature for 17. Real mature. I've been giving her advice about boys, relationships. She trusts me." Judge Morris's expression hardened. "Mr. Collins, what is the nature of your relationship with Haley Hayes?" Brady's face had gone red. I'm I'm a friend of the family. Sometimes teenagers need someone to talk to who isn't their parent. Someone to talk to about relationships? Just general advice. Nothing inappropriate. Mr. Hayes, Judge Morris turned to Mason. What's your position on Mr. Collins's involvement with your daughter? Mason stood up slowly. Your Honor, I believe Mr. Collins has been grooming my daughter as part of a plan to replace me as her father figure. He's been inserted into her life without my knowledge or consent, and he's been giving her advice designed to turn her against me. Do you have evidence of this? We have recordings of him discussing his relationship with my daughter. We have evidence that he was listed as an emergency contact at her school without my knowledge. We have documentation showing that he picked her up from school and took her to a medical appointment without my permission. Judge Morris was taking notes rapidly. Mrs. Hayes, did you authorize Mr. Collins to be listed as an emergency contact for your daughter? Yes, Your Honor. Without consulting your husband? We were having marital difficulties. I thought it would be good for Haley to have additional support. From your boyfriend? Silence. Mrs. Hayes, I asked you a question. Yes, Your Honor. I thought Brady could be a positive male influence in her life. While you were having an affair with him? Yes. Judge Morris set down her pen. I'm going to call a recess. I want to speak with Haley Hayes privately before making any decisions about custody. Haley was called into the judge's chambers alone. Mason waited in the hallway, pacing, while Claire sat motionless on a bench nearby. Brady had been asked to leave the building. 30 minutes later, Haley emerged, her eyes red from crying. She looked at both parents, then walked directly to Mason. Dad, she said quietly, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Mason put his arms around his daughter, feeling her shake against his chest. Know what, sweetheart? About Mom and Brady. About what they were planning. I thought you were just being possessive and old-fashioned. What did you tell the judge? The truth, that Brady's been creeping me out for weeks, that he asks weird questions about my personal life, that Mom's been saying things about you that didn't feel right. Claire stood up, her face desperate. Haley, honey, don't, Haley said without turning around. Just don't. 20 minutes later, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Morris looked exhausted. After speaking with Haley Hayes, I'm prepared to make a ruling on temporary custody pending the divorce proceedings. Mason held his breath. Given the evidence of infidelity, the inappropriate involvement of Mr. Collins with the minor child, and the testimony of the child herself, I'm granting temporary sole custody to Mr. Hayes. Claire gasped audibly. Mrs. Hayes, you will have supervised visitation rights to be arranged through the family court services. Mr. Collins is not to have any contact with Haley Hayes whatsoever. If he violates this order, he will be arrested. Your Honor, Claire's lawyer stood up. We request an immediate appeal. Denied. The child is 17 years old, nearly an adult, and has expressed a clear preference. My decision stands. While the custody battle was raging, Langford had been working on the financial aspects of the divorce. What he discovered made Mason's blood run cold. She's been systematically emptying your joint accounts, Langford explained during a meeting in early June. Small withdrawals just under the reporting limits. Over the past 6 months, she's moved nearly $40,000 to an account you don't have access to. $40,000? That's just the beginning. She's also opened credit cards in your name, run up debt on the joint cards, and taken a second mortgage on the house. Mason felt like he'd been punched in the gut. How is that possible? She's still your wife. She has legal access to your assets until the divorce is finalized, but what she's done goes beyond normal marital expenses. This looks like deliberate asset stripping. Can we stop it? I've already filed for an emergency restraining order on all joint accounts. But the damage is substantial. How substantial? You're looking at somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 in debt that didn't exist 6 months ago. Mason rubbed his temples. What about the business? That's where it gets interesting. Legally, your business is a marital asset, which means she's entitled to half its value. But I've been looking at Brady's financial situation, and he's in serious trouble. What kind of trouble? Tax liens, defaulted business loans, credit card debt. The guy's leveraged to the hilt. I think Claire's been bankrolling his lifestyle, and now they're both drowning. Good. Gets better. I also found evidence that Brady's been using your home address for some of his business correspondence. Technically, that makes him a tenant, which means we can sue him for rent. How much rent? Fair market value for a private residence in your neighborhood? About $1,500 a month for 6 months? $9,000 plus interest and penalties. Mason smiled for the first time in weeks. Do it! There's more. Brady's been posting about his relationship with Claire on social media. Pictures from expensive restaurants, vacation photos, bragging about his sugar mama, all time stamped during the period when Claire was supposedly trying to save your marriage. Evidence of fraud. Evidence that your wife was using marital assets to finance her affair. The court's not going to look kindly on that. The story broke on local social media first. Someone, Mason never found out who, had screenshot all of Brady's posts about his married conquest and created a compilation video set to music. Within 24 hours, it had been shared hundreds of times. Local Facebook groups picked it up. The yoga studio where Claire worked started getting negative reviews. Brady's gym was hit even harder. Screenshots of his posts about training married women in more ways than one went viral in the fitness community. Clients started canceling memberships. His business partners demanded answers. Mason was at the shop when Trevor called. "You need to see this," Trevor said. "Someone posted security footage from the hotel." "What security footage?" "From the night you confronted them in the parking lot. It shows them coming out of the hotel together, then you walking up and having a conversation. But someone edited it to make it look like a much longer confrontation." "Edited how?" "Added captions. Made it look like you were threatening them, stalking them. It's not accurate, but it's effective." Mason felt his stomach drop. Who would do that? My guess? Claire's lawyer. Or Brady trying to salvage his reputation. Can we prove it's edited? Maybe, but the damage is already done. It's been shared 1,000 times. Mason hung up and immediately called Langford. "I saw it," Langford said before Mason could speak. "We're already working on a response. Defamation lawsuit, cease and desist orders, the whole package." "Will it work?" "It'll establish that they're willing to lie and manipulate evidence." "That's useful in court. What about the public relations damage?" "Let me ask you something, Mason. Do you care what people think, or do you care about getting your life back?" Mason thought about it. 6 months ago, he would have cared desperately about his reputation, about what the neighbors thought, about maintaining appearances. Now, all he cared about was protecting his daughter and making sure Claire and Brady paid for what they'd done. "I care about winning," he said. "Good, because we're about to play our trump card, the alienation lawsuit." The civil lawsuit against Brady for alienation of affection was filed on a Monday morning in late June. Unlike the divorce proceedings, this was a matter of public record, which meant anyone could read the filing. The local newspaper picked up the story by Wednesday. "Local businessman sues personal trainer for $100,000 in alienation case," read the headline. The article laid out the basic facts. Mason Hayes, owner of Hayes HVAC, was seeking damages from Brady Collins, alleging that Collins had deliberately interfered with his marriage and caused the breakdown of his family. What made the story interesting was the evidence. Langford had included excerpts from Brady's social media posts in the court filing, along with a timeline showing how Brady had systematically inserted himself into the Hayes family's life. The quotes were devastating. "Another married housewife falls for the Brady charm. Hubby never saw it coming. When you're this good-looking, wives throw themselves at you." Literally. Married women are the best lovers because they're so grateful for attention. By Friday, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets. Brady's gym started receiving protests. Claire's yoga studio put her on administrative leave. Haley came home from school that day looking shaken. "Dad," she said, "everyone's talking about this. Kids at school are asking me questions about Mom and Brady." Mason felt a stab of guilt. He'd been so focused on revenge that he hadn't considered how this would affect his daughter. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I never wanted you to have to deal with this." "It's not your fault," Haley said firmly. "Mom and Brady did this. You're just making sure they can't do it to anyone else." "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I'm angry. I'm angry that Mom lied to me. I'm angry that Brady pretended to be my friend when he was really trying to replace you. And I'm angry that they made me choose sides. You didn't have to choose sides." "Yes, I did." because staying neutral would have meant letting them get away with it. Mason hugged his daughter, feeling proud of her strength and heartbroken that she'd had to grow up so fast. In early July, Claire's lawyer requested a meeting to discuss settlement terms. They're scared, Langford told Mason. The publicity has been brutal, and Brady's facing financial ruin. They want to make a deal. What kind of deal? Claire keeps the house but takes on all the debt. You keep the business and primary custody of Haley. She gets supervised visitation and pays you child support. What about Brady? He's willing to settle the alienation case for $25,000. Mason thought about it. The money would help offset the financial damage Claire had done. The custody arrangement would protect Haley, and the public humiliation had already accomplished most of what he'd hoped for. But something still bothered him. What's the catch? He asked. No catch. They're desperate to make this go away. There's always a catch. Langford smiled. Well, there's one thing. Claire wants a non-disclosure agreement. She doesn't want you talking to the media about the affair or the settlement. Absolutely not. I thought you'd say that. What if we counteroffer? You agree to stop pursuing the alienation case and they agree to a public apology? What kind of apology? Full admission of the affair, acknowledgement that they manipulated your daughter, and a statement that your response was justified. Mason considered this. A public apology would be almost as satisfying as a financial victory, and it would clear his name from any suggestion that he'd been the problem. Do it, he said. The confrontation with friends. The hardest part wasn't dealing with Claire and Brady. It was dealing with the friends who'd chosen sides. Mason's breaking point came at a barbecue thrown by his neighbor, Jim Peterson. Mason had been invited, but when he arrived, he found several mutual friends who'd clearly been discussing his situation. The conversation stopped when he walked into the backyard. Mason, Jim said awkwardly. Glad you could make it. Mason grabbed a beer from the cooler and nodded at the group. Don't stop talking on my account. We weren't, started Mike Patterson, another neighbor. Bees, Mason said calmly. You were talking about my divorce. About how I've been handling things, about whether I'm the good guy or the bad guy in all this. The group exchanged uncomfortable glances. Look, Mason, said Dave Roberts, who'd been friends with both Mason and Claire for years. We're just trying to understand what happened. Claire's been telling people that you became obsessive, that you invaded her privacy. Claire's been lying, Mason interrupted. But you knew that already, didn't you? We don't know what to believe. Mason set down his beer. You want to know what to believe? Believe the evidence. Believe the court records. Believe the recordings and the photographs and the social media posts. We haven't seen any of that stuff, Mike said, because you didn't ask. You just listened to Claire's version and decided I was the problem. That's not fair, Dave protested. We've known Claire for 15 years. We know she's not a malicious person. You knew the Claire she wanted you to see. You didn't know the woman who was stealing money from our joint accounts to finance her affair. You didn't know the woman who was encouraging her boyfriend to get close to our teenage daughter? Mason, you know what the worst part is? Mason continued. None of you called me. None of you asked for my side of the story. You just assumed that because Claire seemed like the sufferer, I must be the villain. We didn't want to take sides, Jim said. By not taking sides, you took sides. You believed her over me. You enabled her lies. Mason looked around the group. Men he'd known for years who'd been to his house for dinner, who'd watched his daughter grow up. I'm not angry that you believed her, he said. I'm angry that you never questioned whether what she was telling you made sense. I'm angry that 20 years of friendship meant so little that you were willing to throw it away based on gossip. He turned and walked toward the gate. Mason, wait, Dave called after him. Mason stopped and turned around. You want to make this right? Stop spreading Claire's version of events. Stop acting like this is some kind of he said, she said situation. The truth is available to anyone who cares enough to look for it. What do you want us to do? I want you to be the friends you should have been 6 months ago. I want you to admit that you screwed up. And I want you to stop treating me like a pariah for defending my family. He left the barbecue and never spoke to any of them again. The settlement was finalized on a Thursday in late July. As part of the agreement, Claire and Brady issued a joint statement to the local newspaper. We, Claire Hayes and Brady Collins, wish to publicly acknowledge that we engaged in an extramarital affair that caused substantial damage to the Hayes family We manipulated their daughter and attempted to turn her against her father. Mason Hayes' response to our actions was appropriate and justified. We deeply regret the pain we caused and take full responsibility for the destruction of the Hayes marriage. The statement was published on the front page of the local section, along with a photo of Mason and Haley. The accompanying article noted that Brady's gym had closed permanently and that he was facing additional legal action from other creditors. Claire had been terminated from her position at the yoga studio and was reportedly planning to leave town. Mason read the article over coffee that morning, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. He'd won, but the victory felt hollow. 20 years of marriage, gone. A family, destroyed. All because Claire had wanted something new and exciting. "Dad?" Haley appeared in the kitchen, still in her pajamas. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Mason said honestly. "But glad it's over." "Are you going to be okay?" Mason looked at his daughter, 17 years old, about to start her senior year of high school, already showing the strength and wisdom that would serve her well in life. "Yeah," he said. "We're going to be okay." 6 months later, Mason was rebuilding his life. The business was doing better than ever. The publicity from the divorce had actually brought in new customers who respected the way he'd handled the situation. Haley was thriving in her senior year, already accepted to 3 colleges. She'd started seeing a therapist to work through the emotional damage from her mother's betrayal, but she was healing. Claire had moved to another state, reportedly working as a server at a chain restaurant. She called Haley occasionally, but their relationship remained strained. Brady had disappeared entirely after declaring bankruptcy. Mason occasionally saw updates on social media. He was apparently working construction now, living in a studio apartment, his dreams of fitness empire glory long forgotten. The house felt different without Claire's presence. Quieter, but also more peaceful. Mason had redecorated, removing reminders of their life together, creating something new. On a Saturday morning in January, exactly 1 year after he'd discovered Claire's affair, Mason was working in his garage when Trevor stopped by. "How's life treating you, brother?" Trevor asked. "Better," Mason said. "Much better." "Any regrets?" Mason thought about it. "I regret that it had to happen. I regret that Haley had to go through all this, but I don't regret fighting back. A lot of guys would have just rolled over and taken it. Maybe. But I'm not a lot of guys," Trevor grinned. "No, you're definitely not." That afternoon, Mason and Haley drove to the college she'd chosen, a small liberal arts school about 3 hours away. She'd be starting in the fall, and they were meeting with her advisor to plan her course schedule. During the drive, Haley was quiet, looking out the window at the passing landscape. "Penny for your thoughts," Mason said. "I was thinking about Mom," she said, "about how different everything could have been if she'd just been honest with you. Probably, but we can't change what happened. We can only decide how to move forward. I'm proud of you, Dad, for how you handled everything, for not letting them get away with it." Mason glanced at his daughter, feeling a surge of love and pride. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart, for being strong enough to see the truth, for choosing what was right instead of what was easy. Do you think Mom will ever understand what she did wrong? I don't know. Maybe someday. But that's not our problem anymore." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, watching the countryside roll by. Mason felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year. Peace. He'd lost a wife, but he'd saved his daughter. He'd lost friends, but he'd gained self-respect. He'd lost his illusions about marriage and trust, but he'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that he could fight for what mattered and win. The revenge had been sweet, but the rebuilding was sweeter. As they pulled into the college parking lot, Haley turned to him with a smile. "Ready for the next chapter, Dad?" Mason smiled back. "Absolutely." Mason stood in the back of the high school auditorium, watching Haley give her valedictorian speech. She was talking about resilience, about overcoming adversity, about the importance of having people in your life who would fight for you when you couldn't fight for yourself. In the audience, he could see some of the neighbors who'd turned their backs on him during the divorce. They were applauding now, probably not making the connection between Haley's speech and their own behavior 2 years earlier. Mason didn't care. Their opinion no longer mattered to him. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and congratulations, Mason felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Douglas Langford, his former lawyer. "Congratulations," Langford said. "You should be proud." "I am," Mason replied. "How have you been?" Busy. I actually wanted to talk to you about something. I've been getting calls from other men in similar situations. Men who've heard about your case and want advice on how to fight back against cheating wives and their boyfriends. What kind of advice? Legal strategy mostly, but also emotional support. The kind of support you could have used when you were going through this. Mason considered this. He'd thought about writing a book about his experience, maybe starting a blog or support group, but he'd been too focused on rebuilding his life to pursue it. What are you suggesting? A consulting business. Help men who are being manipulated and betrayed. Show them how to gather evidence, how to build a case, how to fight for their kids and their assets. And make money off other people's misery. Make money helping people fight back against injustice. There's a difference. Mason looked across the auditorium at Haley, who was posing for pictures with her friends. She caught his eye and waved, her smile bright and genuine. 2 years ago, he'd been a broken man, betrayed by his wife and abandoned by his friends. Now he was the father of the valedictorian, owner of a successful business, and apparently someone other men looked up to as an example of how to handle adversity. I'll think about it, he told Langford. Later that night, after the graduation party, Mason and Haley sat on the back deck of their house, watching the stars. So, Haley said, Mister, Langford talked to you about the consulting thing. How did you know about that? I heard him mention it to Mrs. Patterson. She was asking about you. Mrs. Patterson was asking about me? Yeah. Apparently, her husband's been having an affair with his secretary, and she wants to know how you handled things so well. Mason shook his head. The irony. Dad, I think you should do it. The consulting thing, why? Because you're good at helping people. And because there are probably a lot of men out there who need someone to show them that they don't have to be sufferers. Mason thought about all the emails he'd received over the past year from men who'd read about his case online. Men whose wives were cheating, whose kids were being turned against them, whose friends had abandoned them. He thought about the satisfaction he'd felt in beating Claire and Brady at their own game. The sense of justice when the truth finally came out. The peace that came from knowing he'd fought for what mattered. Maybe you're right, he said. Of course I'm right. I'm the valedictorian. Mason laughed and put his arm around his daughter. Yes, you are. As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky, Mason reflected on how far they'd both come. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed their family had ultimately made them stronger. Claire had wanted to trade stability for excitement, loyalty for passion, family for freedom. In the end, she'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for and lost everything that really mattered. Brady had wanted to prove he could take another man's wife and family. He'd succeeded briefly and then discovered that actions have consequences. Mason had wanted justice, and he'd gotten it. But more importantly, he'd gotten his daughter's respect, his own self-respect, and the knowledge that he was capable of fighting for what he believed in. Some people might call it revenge. Mason preferred to think of it as accountability. Dad? Haley said quietly. Yeah? Thank you for fighting for us, for not giving up. Thank you for believing in me when it mattered most. Always, she said, and Mason knew she meant it.